folks, so welcome to another episode of Natalie's Sofa, or Wednesday on Natalie's Sofa. Now tonight, three things I wanted to talk about. We've got the Lumix and Panasonic fans who have the Lumix S5 and S5iiX cameras. We've got a firmware update that I've been looking at, some of the updates in that. But first I'm going to quickly go over some things kind of related to last week with regards to the motovlogging I talked about in the last few episodes actually. So first of all, I talked about testing out the audio in the crash helmet, and I'd had problems with it peaking and being too high. Well, I tested it with my wireless microphone, which I can plug a lav mic into because this has variable gain and I can turn the gain down. And I found that actually it's pretty much perfect on the bottom setting. In fact, I might be able to bump it up to the middle setting. So I'm going to test it out at the weekend, because I won't be able to do it till I get some time at the weekend. But I'm hopeful I'll be able to get much better audio when I'm out doing motorcycle photograph vlogs, for whatever you want to call them, which is really good because it means I can do commentary both off the bike when I'm doing the photography and commentary when I'm actually on the bike, and hopefully with minimal wind noise, we can get something sorted out. So, good old Rode Wireless Go microphone. I've had this for years. I paid £180 for it and well recommended. I'll probably get another one if I got the chance. But the wind muff is glued on now because it keeps falling off. I've got a video if you actually check how to do that. But yeah, I'm quite happy that I've got that sorted out. The other thing I did touch on a few weeks ago was wanting to get an Insta360 camera. And literally days after I talked about it, Insta360 released the X4. Now, it's still not readily available in the UK. It's currently set for release towards the end of the month or start of May even. I've left a message with London Camera Exchange, my local camera shop, to see when it's going to be out, and they're going to have a chat with whoever they get their cameras from and let me know roughly when it's going to be in stock, because I would prefer to buy it from them if I can. So I'm hoping to get one of those, and this can give me sort of drone-like footage, not just on my bike, but also it could be really good for port photography, giving you if I'm hiking, I can carry it on on a stick and you can see where I'm actually going, and I don't have to worry about pointing the camera in a direction. It's a very versatile camera, and these it'll complement the Pocket 3, which is more personal, where I can do sort of bits to camera like I'm doing now. And then you've got the 360 camera, which gives you a more, like having a little tiny, you can get a little tiny drone that does this actually. We'll talk about that in another video. But it's like having a little tiny drone following you. And I'm hoping to get one of these in the month, but I wanted to keep that short and sweet, other than the fact that the new 360 can do 8K video, which means that there's a huge scope for cropping. And that means if you're recording in 8K, you're not going to broadcast in 8K, but you can crop into the image and still have very usable footage, which doesn't look like it's being cropped into. You've got a little bit better slow motion, bit better low light performance. You've got a feature that allows you to, on the X4, simulate motion blur. If you were doing Route 180 shutter, which is how you get like silky smooth footage. If you pause the video on an action camera, generally if it's been done without an ND filter, it'll be a very high frame rate, and you'll pause it and there'll be no blur. Whereas if you pause a film on the television, you'll see there's like blur around it. You can't get like a good sharp image, and that's because it's shot at a very low shutter speed. A film that's at 25 frames per second is shot at 1/50th to get that motion blur to give the person who watches an impression of movement. So that's quite an important step that it's got that. But adding on to that, you've got clip-on protective filters, which at the moment you can only get protective filters. But you can bet your bottom dollar that in a few weeks or months' time after the release, there'll be ND filters. Now, I don't know how well ND filters will work because action cameras and ND filters can be problematic with their stabilization, but that's something we'll have to explore. But I'm not too worried if we don't have an ND filter, because this new AI sort of motion blur simulates 180 shutter in effect, and that's a very intriguing feature to look at. So fingers crossed I can get that sorted out and get a hold of one of those. I've got to sort cash out for that because it's quite an expensive purchase. So as action cameras goes, it's about, I think it's £500. Anyway, on to what I wanted to talk about. The main feature is we're filming obviously on a Lumix S5iiX, and I'm using some of the new features. So I'll quickly go. I've got them on the screen over here, so I'm going to look to the left because I can never remember what I'm talking about. It's typical. I need the teleprompter in front of me. So basically, there are a couple of new features. You've got enhancement of production workflows, which basically means you can connect the camera to frame.io, Adobe's frame.io, which is real-time uploading of photographs and video for collaboration. Not something I've looked at in a great deal, but I might do one day. Proxy video recording, that's quite handy, possibly. This means instead of now this is why I record in ProRes HQ at the minute, because ProRes is dead easy to edit and you tend to not need proxies. But proxies can be quite handy because they're small, compact, easy to move around, or they're very handy for MP4 footage, which is very hard to edit. So the camera can actually record proxies to make it easier for you to edit. Very sort of low quality, small size files in camera. We've got improved basic performance, as they've called it, which is improvements to the autofocus. Now that's what I want to focus on today, because I've got some test footage to bring up shortly, and some photographs that'll show you what the improvements can do, and I'll give you my thoughts on the improvements, because one of the things that I was disappointed with the Lumix cameras was the performance of the autofocus in at 240 frames per second slow motion. Anyway, next we've got some enhanced stabilization. Now I couldn't test that because the footage I've done was in slow motion, and the ESI, the enhanced stabilization, isn't available in high frame rates. But you can use the standard boost IS, which is what I was using to get these shots that you're about to come up. But again, we'll cover that in a moment. And lastly, they've got pre-burst shooting, which is a feature that my Fuji cameras have, where when you half press the shutter, the camera's already fired off a couple of shots, so it's always got a couple in the buffer. So if you're trying to get, say, a bird taking flight, and you're a fraction of a second late with the shutter, the camera's got you because it'll have captured maybe a second or two's footage prior to you fully pressing the shutter. So that's something I've never really tried on either of my cameras because it uses the electronic shutter, but I'm going to give it a go. Electronic and mechanical shutters is, I think, another subject to cover in a later video, because there are certain caveats to do with what's called rolling shutter, which can be problematic when you're using electronic shutter. But I can't really comment until I've tried it, and I've shied away from it because I didn't want to lose the shot. Anyway, let's talk about the autofocus performance. So I'll look at stills first. So I've got a couple of samples that I'm going to bring up here. And I'm also going to bring up some video of essentially the back of the camera, so you could see what they're going to focus on as well. But first of all, let's look at these stills, and just literally setting the camera up in animal autofocus. And basically what you've got is, instead of just having animal autofocus, you've now got animal autofocus, car autofocus, motorcycle, and human. And you can have it set to detect the full body of I mean, obviously cars don't have eyes. Well, unless they're in a cartoon. I'm joking. So looking at animals and humans, animals is like birds, cats. It's AI. It'll detect what creature it is. But if you set the eye on the camera, then it will detect the eye and the body. Interestingly, and we're testing this autofocus mode out, so keep an eye whether I go out of focus or not. I've got the camera, normally I would have the camera set to an autofocus mode where I've got like a little box over me. You can't see it, obviously. So that if the camera loses focus, it'll still focus on what's in the box. Now I've got this on area, which means the camera just looks in the whole area of the picture, of the frame. And if it sees a face, my face, it will lock onto that. And if I don't go out of focus in this video, it's working. So I've used a slightly different focus method. Let's see how well it works. I can't tell now because I'm filming, so we'll have to talk about that maybe next week. But going back to the bird photography, did a couple of tests on my lunch break today, and I think I found when we look at the now bring up these pictures, I think we're finding that it's actually very, very accurate. And as long as you have the camera on, if you've got it on this area autofocus, it will always find the eye of the bird. And if it can't see the eye, it'll find the body. It does get a little bit confused with foliage, and you'll see that more when I illustrate the videos. But when you've got the camera set to one of its other autofocus methods, like where you've got like a sort of a box or a zone or over the subject, it will only find the eye when it's inside the box, which is good in a way because it lets you either deliberately put a box over the face. So what it meant was that when I was trying to get a sharp shot of a bird behind some foliage, I could turn the pinpoint autofocus down to a teeny tiny little box and put that over the head of the bird, and lo and behold, it picked up the eye. Now, prior to doing it, you couldn't do that on the camera. Even if you made the box dead small, it would tend to try and find the body, and then it would kind of focus on the twigs. It still does get confused sometimes with twigs and things, and I've given it some very challenging tests today. But overall, as you can see from the quality of the shots I've been bringing up, it's really sharp around the eye, and I've been very impressed with what it can get. It's a definite improvement over the previous autofocus or before the firmware update. It's just that you have to, as I've shown you earlier, I'll just bring it up again, from when you look at the back of the camera, and we're using Bob. It's probably going to confuse it now because I've put Bob here. Bob's our test bird, because birds don't always behave. So when we use Bob the test bird, you can see that the footage, the camera is actually locking onto the eye of the pretendy bird, or it's locking onto the body when I move the box off of the pretendy bird. And if I again go on this area autofocus, it will either put a box or an eye on the bird. So it's actually telling you what it's locking onto. Now, a lot of people did think that the Lumix S5 did this anyway. It just didn't display where it had focused. And indeed, sometimes when you played back photographs on the camera, I can't do that now. I've done the firmware update, unfortunately, because it doesn't display the focus point properly on the old pictures. Rather odd. But when you played them back prior to this, it would show you where the autofocus point was on the playback screen in the camera. And sometimes you would get like a little dot over the eye, thinking, oh, it's focused on the eye. So I think it did have rudimentary, but it's a definite improvement. It still gets confused. And if we look onto video, now video I found, and I'm going to bring up some samples as I talk here, the same rules apply with, you can tap to put a box over, you can tap the screen, put a box over. Generally with video, unless you're telling it to track something, it will just have an area and it'll pick up what it thinks in the box. But with Lumix cameras, it does allow you to override that, tap where you want it to focus, and it'll focus. It'll look under that box, and you can size the box on the screen as well. So it's got really good video autofocus. But I found I didn't need to do that. I was just like, oh, I want to get that bird. And these were little birds in soft light, sometimes in shadow. While options were limited because I was just doing it outside the front of the house. And considering there was foliage and twigs in the way, it would lose focus sometimes. But generally speaking, the pulsing's gone. And I'm using the same autofocus settings I've always used. I'll put those in the description below and I'll bring them up on the screen. I'm using the same autofocus settings in video, and I was really impressed. So I did the video test on my Lumix S5ii. And the only difference is that it can't record ProRes, but essentially it records the same. It's the same camera, same autofocus capabilities. It just doesn't have ProRes. That's why I use the S5iiX for this. But I was very impressed by how well it performed, and it wasn't pulsing in 240p slow motion, and you can see for yourself from the footage, and I've had a chance to review it, and there would be times where it would maybe lose focus a bit, and I think that's because I didn't have it set to track fast moving objects. I was more set to film a bird sitting on a stick, so it's obviously going to lose the autofocus if the bird hops around, but it reacquired it very quickly. So all in all, if you are, and I know this makes this week's video more focused for Lumix users, so I do apologise to people who, I'll cover all genres of photography, but sometimes I get focused on one particular area. But if you're in the market for, a new camera and you think of something, you might want to consider the Lumix as a full frame option because it's quite a good camera. It's cheaper than a lot of the other options. L-mount glass is starting to evolve, but it is still a little bit behind. There's likes of Sony and Canon. But its video features are second to none with its internal ProRes on the S5iiX. And the autofocus, I think, and it's probably going to prove me wrong the way I've got it set up. Well, we'll see. You can put it in the comments below what you think. You're watching the video. I'm going to review this later on, but we can see how it's come out with the Face Eye, and it might be that I still have to put the box over me, but I thought I'd try it without the box first to see if it's improved, because it would tend to hunt when I didn't have it set this way, so I didn't have a box over me. So that's where I've seen the improvement. So when I was shooting the video outdoors, I didn't have a box over the bird. I was just like, oh, there's a bird. And I would just put the camera over the bird and let it find it. And that's what it was doing. It was just finding the bird. If I wanted to be specific and there was a twig in the way, yeah, you can touch the screen and pick it up that way. But generally, I just had to point it at the bird and it locked focus on the bird. But as I say, the biggest thing in 240p was that it used to pulse in and out a bit. You could see it beforehand. I wish I did have some test footage of it, and I deleted it because I didn't think I was going to use it. It's typical that I am going to use it, but I haven't got it now to show you. But I did have this. I did remember recording. It was in beautiful light. Recorded a bird called a redwing, and when I got home, it's like, how the bird wasn't behind anything. It had just same settings, but it had just pulsed. And then today we've got little fast moving twitchy birds, blackbird behind a twig, and as long as I put the box in the right place and it found an eye, even in a tiny little box, it found an eye, it would focus really well. So I think a lot of people have been critical of the Lumix cameras for the autofocus, and to be fair, there was some merit in that criticism because they did sell it as having wonderful autofocus, and it does in some respects. It's always been good for pieces to camera like this, but it's struggled a little bit for wildlife, but definite improvement. I would say it's up there with my XS20 now, which is very good in 240p for autofocus. I don't know whether we'll get to Sony levels, but I've never used a Sony camera, so I don't know how good Sony really is. If any Sony users, you can tell me. But definitely an improvement, definitely worth putting these firmware updates on, and well done to Lumix for pushing them out, because it's not too often you get firmware updates that make this difference. But then Fuji have been doing the same. The XS20's autofocus was a bit wonky to start with, but it's had a firmware update and it's much improved. And the XT5 and XS20 have pending firmware updates imminently due to be released. The XH2S got its firmware just the other day, a few days ago, and these autofocus improvements are coming to the other Fuji cameras too. So it's been a feast of firmware updates this month, so hopefully more to come for Fuji and more to talk about next week. So short and sweet this week. I just wanted to cover those few areas. So again, if you like the video, please remember to like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below as well, because the more you comment below, the more it makes the algorithm do algorithmy things. And I'm going to say thank you very much for everyone who watched and commented on all the videos so far, especially my last Natalie Sofa video. For me, it went viral. I've never had a video that's garnered well over 1,000 views in a couple of days. But after 3 days, it was up to 1,200. I haven't checked it recently. So thank you for your support on these videos. I like to think that going down well because they seem to be quite warmly received. But again, comments below. If you want to criticise something, comments below. If you want to be positive about something, comments below. Okay, right. I will catch you all next week, folks. See you all later. Bye.